APUS government students, here is your lecture 6.6, starting on page 104 of your green packet. Great quote there to start off this lecture. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. So, great quote. No matter what's in front of you, no matter the hurdles, no matter the obstacles, no matter the setbacks. And I think we've all faced those. We continue to face those. That's part of life, that we continue to do our best to move forward. You'll see there that with the notes, the document dive for the Birmingham letter from jail, part of the reason why I had you guys do that first is that so you could be able to fill out the answers for that in addition to what you've already written down in your blue packet. So now you can maybe pause it here and fill that out real quick before you begin to get more notes here. All right, some of the laws and policies within civil rights that we need to know. So, these things are going to begin throughout various times within our country's history. Post World War II, it will be small. It will be measured in baby steps. We obviously talked about Brown versus Board happening in the 50s, but it's really not truly until the 1960s through the civil rights movement led by people like Martin Luther King that things begin to move forward. So we had JFK as a part of that. We had that move forward. You can see LBJ there signing the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that you guys and gals are getting down. So you can see these things happening here in the mid 60s. One of the interesting things for us to look at within this topic is, as you can see there, the current issue of voter identification. And that's an interesting thing from a standpoint of most of you think that when you go and vote, you're going to need to have some sort of identification, documentation, some sort of ID to be able to vote. And there's a number of different thoughts on both sides of that. And those that would not support strict photo IDs would say that, and I'll show this to you in the next slide, that there's a great number of groups of people that don't have those. And those groups of people are people that have traditionally, struggled with or have been discriminated against in terms of voting. But I think we can also see the other side of it too. We don't want to have fraud in our voting system. We don't want to have problems or issues. And that's why a good number of states have pressed forward with the idea of having some sort of voter identification to vote. This gives you a good look at it. I know that you have that picture bottom right of 104. It's much better to see it here. So you can see the different states and how they look at photo identification to vote. Nebraska, very interesting, right there in the middle. I remember going to vote for the first time. I had my passport. I had my driver's license. There was going to be no question or issue about who I was to allow me to vote. I'll never forget her telling me that I needed to put those away because she could not require me to show my to show my photo in order to vote. She found my name. I told her who I was. I signed my name and I voted. So you can see Nebraska versus other states along this spectrum. And those that would argue against voter ID, you can see bottom right there. The adults without a valid or current photo ID. And I know we take it for granted, but we have a lot of people. This source saying that about 1 in 10 people don't have a photo ID. And you can see those groups up there on the spectrum that also do not have them. Whether it's, for example, I think about my grandmother. I'm not sure that she has a photo ID anymore. She hasn't needed to travel abroad. She doesn't have a passport. She hasn't driven in about 5 to 10 years. She hasn't wanted to drive, so I'm not even sure she has her. In fact, I'm pretty sure she doesn't have a valid photo ID. She may still have her license, but she doesn't have a valid license because it's expired. So you can think about the different ways in which something as simple as this may not be as such simple as we may think that it is. Let's move on quickly here to affirmative action. This is a big issue, I would say more so in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s that it is now that you guys in the last 10 or 15 years have been around. The idea of affirmative action is the recognition of historical discrimination of minority groups. And what affirmative action programs tried to create over the last 30 or 40 years was giving these groups special consideration in terms of hiring and in terms of letting them into educational institutions. So let's say, for example, a law school would hold a specific number of positions for minorities. But what you can see is the flip side of why these are now kind of on the downhill in terms of being used in our society is that you can argue that it's reverse discrimination. That you can argue, though it has good intentions, that if you're going to base acceptance, if you're going to base hiring, if you're going to base anything upon race, it's got issues. It's got issues. So as we think back to our hurdles in terms of equal protection, there's some high hurdle issues here. Even though it has good intentions, it's still basing something upon race, ethnicity. And that creates high hurdle problems. And a lot of these affirmative action programs have run into equal protection issues because of race and ethnicity being a factor. Okay? Let's transition to looking at some of these issues. So this is an opportunity maybe to pause it here to allow the students to look at this question here and see what they think about the answer. Focusing on Title 9. All right, so you can hopefully, I think, recognize the answer to this is D. So Title 9 is centered on a number of different things. All right, besides the 19th Amendment giving women suffrage, we've got Title 9, which is the thing that we hear most about today in what it does and what it provides. So let's take a look at this another. So the 19th Amendment, 100 years ago this year, giving women the right to vote. The Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act in 2009, it's about a decade old now, putting punishments in place for businesses that are proven to not pay women the same as men for the same job. So it's honestly, to me, kind of mind-blowing that it took until 2009 for us to do this. Women, you're probably not surprised, but guys out there, you need to begin to realize, if you don't already, that women for long periods of time have not been paid the same for the same job. And that's wrong. That's discrimination. That's not something that we should support in any way, shape, or form. So to see this, I took this from our book, and yes, it's 10 years old. I'm hopeful that Nebraska and other states are a lot, gosh darn, closer to being in that blue-green color than what they are here now on what you see there, because it's embarrassing and appalling to see, and to see that statistics may show that a woman makes 75 cents on the dollar to what a man makes. So my hope is And I haven't seen recent trends in this, but my hope is that it's a heck of a lot better than this. Let's move to Title IX. So it's a law that was passed in the 1970s, as you saw. It is seen mostly by all of us in terms of sports. But, truly, yes, it's had a great impact on sports, but it's had a lot more impact, I think, within education in general, the things that it's supposed to do for the genders in terms of making them fair, making them equal. We see it mostly in sports, but ladies and gentlemen, it has a huge impact outside of the sports spectrum in high schools and at universities. If we were to take a look at, and I pulled this from the Huskers website down there in Lincoln, this is what we see on the surface in terms of the equal opportunities that are needed to be required for women's sports and men's sports. And just what I'm showing you here is, if Nebraska wants to have a 150-person roster, if that's what Scott Frost wants to do, so be it. Good for him in growing the Husker football roster, but you have to recognize Title IX issues that play into that as well. And that's something that it should be fair. There should be the same opportunities for women and men on campuses. What other institutions have done, primarily in the South, to combat their growing football teams, is that they've created or have a few niche sports that they've just made massive in terms of females. So I know swim teams and rowing teams at places like Clemson and Alabama. How do they balance Title IX? How do they meet Title IX? They have huge, massive teams of rowers and swimmers. And you ladies out there may be okay with that, or you may see that as a sham or whatnot. But I'm just trying to show you kind of what is going on with Title IX in terms of the requirements within the equality that it requires for opportunities. It's the same as scholarships as well, and sometimes those scholarship opportunities are imbalanced because there's so many in football. So you can see that there's more women's scholarships versus men's the Division I level, because you have to balance out those scholarships with what is in Division I 85 scholarships for most Division I football programs. All right, last slide. Rights for gays and lesbians. This is a great slide for us to take a look at the evolution in your lifetime of this issue. And it ties back to some questions you'll see on your test in terms of, most of these rights have been shaped by the Supreme Court. They've been shaped by decisions by the Supreme Court. So, yes, we have some laws that are coming along and supplementing these, but it's really been these Supreme Court decisions that have sort of led the way in that. So as we look at Windsor, one of the things you got to realize quickly here is that there's some economic issues that you don't yet see as a young person that me and Mr. Wood see. For example, when I got married, we got amazing tax benefits. I got, being a single person, being a married person, there's a lot of tax benefits that I got being married versus being a single person. And part of this plays into that, and part of this is the support behind the arguments of these. So we're talking about benefits within that, and it's same-sex couples saying, "Hey, if Joey and Krista can get these benefits, then Jimmy and Joe and Shelly and Sheila should get them too." So, and that's what the Windsor case says. The federal government can't treat those two groups differently. And then what Obergefell comes along and says is that Nebraska, you can't keep these people from getting married. We have to provide everyone the opportunity to get married. Quick review. Yes, this is judicial activism, and yes, this is broad construction, and yes, we've had laws come behind and support this, but the belief sets behind these were made with judicial activism and broad construction rhetoric. All right, that should give you the notes for lecture 6.6.